Right, everyone. I think we're going to get started. I know everyone's taking some time out of their evening to be here. So without further delay or ado, I will pass it off to Greg.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. This is the third in this series of webinars hosted by SRPEDD. We're glad you all can make it today. Before we dive into today's topics, I'm just going to introduce myself, my coworkers, and our co-presenters. My name is Gregory Girton. I'm a senior transportation planner for SRPEDD. Today I'll be joined by my coworker Lizeth Gonzalez, principal comprehensive planner here at SRPEDD. Additionally, we've got Bob Esmendola, Catherine Pierick, and Jennifer Carloni, all from our member communities, with presentations as well today. Now for some virtual meeting guidelines. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to SRPEDD's Moving Forward 2045 webpage. We ask that all participants please remain muted and turn off your video until the Q&A portion of the webinar. To participate in the Q&A portion of the webinar, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button. The presenters will then call on participants. Feel free at any point in the webinar to type a question or comment into the chat window, and we will address as many of those questions as we can during the Q&A. If you're attending on your phone, you can use *6 to toggle mute and *9 to raise your hand. If for some reason we run short on time and can't have a live Q&A, we will be following up afterwards to answer all of your questions via email. So first, a little bit about us. We are the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. Our agency serves a regional community of 27 cities and towns in Southeastern Mass. Our work is place-based and community-focused, meaning that we work to formulate and implement plans that will achieve real quality of life improvements on the ground, and to ensure that these plans reflect the expressed needs of civically engaged local communities. Our agency consists of 4 departments: comprehensive planning, which also consists of housing and environment, economic development, homeland security, and transportation. Next slide. So as for why we're here today, every 4 years, our transportation department develops the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. It's a blueprint of our existing and future transportation system. The RTP considers every facet of transportation, including roads, bridges, travel patterns, public transportation, freight, airports, as well as bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. It assesses our transportation needs and identifies the necessary improvements to enhance our transportation system. So with this webinar series, we want to shed some light on a variety of topics by bringing together local perspectives and proven concepts from our own backyard and around the world. This webinar series is about asking ourselves important questions that can help guide our thinking as an agency and as a region moving forward. Now, as an agency, we aren't in the business of telling you how you should get around, but we can recognize the role that transportation plays in supporting economic development. Today's conversation will focus on driving economic development in our region. On that note, let's switch gears and get right into today's topic. Take it away, Lizeth.
Thanks, Greg. So my role here today is really to set the stage for our presenters. One of the things that we want to recognize is that economic development and transportation have a really close relationship and impact one another in very different ways. The other reason why we bring economic development into this conversation when it comes to the RTP is because we really want to talk about and think about our priorities. When it comes to funding, are we looking at highways and corridor improvements, or multimodal facilities, transportation and public transit related improvements? But the important thing to think about today is that these examples that we're going to talk about and that our presenters tonight are going to show us is that this really gives us insight into what we can do in our own communities and how we can apply these transportation solutions to create economic development in our own backyards. So one of the first kind of geographic areas that we can think of when it comes to economic development is TOD. Transit-oriented development is a really popular strategy that really focuses on transportation improvements in order to bring about economic development, vitality, and just activity in general. So we're looking at focusing compact, mixed use, and pedestrian friendly public spaces, all kind of centered around a rail station. As you know, many new stations are popping up in our region, and that creates a lot of activity and a lot of excitement. You'll notice here on the side of the screen, we included some funding sources that people can, pursue and explore when it comes to these types of activities and transportation solutions as applied to certain kind of geographic locations. TOD really kind of talks about this transition from our previous planning patterns of, disconnected, very car-oriented, allowing for those distances, to a more compact development style that coordinates land uses and thinks about how we can connect not only, commercial activity, residential activity with the transportation infrastructure that creates that type of, vitality in a neighborhood. When we think about TOD, we also want to think about the types of facilities and infrastructure that we're advocating for and its impacts, right? So we're connecting neighborhoods, we're improving accessibility, we're also reducing car dependency, and that in turn reduces congestion and creates positive environmental impacts. I mentioned earlier that TOD also considers coordinated land uses, kind of mixing together all those activities into one great space. And this really kind of puts it all together and into some perspective. It's important to note that TOD combines a lot of economic development, not only opportunities through employment, but a greater sense of community. So increasing that opportunity for small businesses, housing opportunities, and all of that creates that perfect environment for growth. The second geographic area that we're going to focus on is corridors. They connect our communities, they bring about different connections. And when it comes to corridors, what we really want to think about is how we can improve our multimodal accommodations. Again, think about reestablishing connections between our neighborhoods. Traditionally, a lot of corridors have actually divided neighborhoods and created gaps. And this also allows us to think about that efficient use of land and infrastructure again. And as always, when we think about corridor improvements, we're always thinking about safety. This here is an example from Fall River. I believe it's from a public hearing that took place last year, and it relates to the Route 79 reconstruction project. And as you can see here, what their goal is to take this, which is a raised corridor, and turn it into something that creates development parcels, bringing it down to street level, creating local street connections and installing a network of shared use paths and sidewalks to create that multimodal experience and opportunity. And again, traffic controls for safety. The last one that I want to focus on is Main Street and downtown. A lot of communities love their main streets, their downtowns, their centers for activity. And it's this concept of streets as places that contribute to, advancing equity, community, a feeling of sustainability and economic development again. Now, when these first came about, traditionally they were car oriented. So applying these transportation solutions not only help us increase safety in our main streets and downtowns, but also, again, foster economic development, create the right conditions for it. This here is an example of what is considered one of the best downtowns in Massachusetts. I believe it was actually voted that. And this is Hudson, Massachusetts. They, provide a number of amenities and facilities to create a great space for their not only pedestrians, people who travel by car, people who walk, and also bike. And what we also want to think about is accessibility, whether it be ADA accessibility or just creating those conditions for activity. And you can see there's a lot of street fronts they installed a rotary to increase traffic safety. Now, we have to recognize that vehicles aren't going to go away, but we need to make the conditions to create a safer environment for their use and also for pedestrians and bicyclists if we're advocating for that shared space. This is a much more transit-oriented kind of solution to a main street or downtown, integrating traffic stops and those harbors for while you're waiting, traffic calming features, allowing for exclusive bike, bus, and car lanes. Though they're not featured here, some things that have been floated around are charging stations or traffic signals. So before I hand it off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. And I'm going to let Catherine Furyk from the City of Attleboro tell us a little bit about transit-oriented development there.
Thanks so much. Great presentation. For those of you who aren't aware of Attleboro, it's or don't know that much about it, it's a growing city. It's connected via commuter rail to both Boston and Providence. You can get to Providence in under 20 minutes. You can get to Boston in about 45. So it's it's a pretty convenient place for people to live and to really make good use of a commuter rail station. We have two. One is in South Attleboro, off of Route 1A, and the other one is right in the center of town. Today I'm going to talk about our transit-oriented development district, which is steps from our downtown. It's part of our downtown, and it's adjacent directly to the commuter rail station. Next. Keep going. So the TOD location, like I said, it's very centrally located. It sits along a riverfront. The 10-mile river cuts through our downtown. It separates a predominantly residential area to the west of the river from what used to be a heavily industrial area to the right and the commuter rail station. Next. It's a lot of land. The entirety of our TOD, as we've defined it through both the zoning overlay district and through district improvement financing, is a little shy of 19 acres. Of course, not all of it is immediately developable. A lot of it belongs to the MBTA. The rest of it, the balance of it, belongs to the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority and now Campanelli. They have constructed the first project within our TOD, which I'll get into later. It has taken about 20 years from start to finish to do this project. It started in the probably late 80s, early 90s under our former mayor, Judy Robbins. She is a woman of great vision who was able to see growth and prosperity and vitality where other people saw a municipal dump and a chemical plant that caught fire and the DPW's laydown yard, not attractive land uses. You can go to the next one. The development context, it's hard to read with the blue stripe there, huh? Anyway, we have a lot going on in our downtown, not just within the TOD. The green dots refer to projects that have been fully permitted within the downtown area. They're ready to roll, and they will add additional residential units, mixed use, in some cases, to the downtown. The yellow dots are projects where there's full site control. Either the legacy owner is considering or actually investing in revitalization, or there's a purchase and sale agreement in place, but they haven't been, they haven't gone through permitting yet. The orange dots are additional really strong prospects where there's continual chatter and interest from private development teams of various types that are trying to make something work. You can go to the next one. As I mentioned, this was a lot of dirty land. Automated machine products north and south was a large industrial use that is now where One Wall Street is and its sister project of Renaissance North, which is just across the road from what we consider our TOD today. Also, like I said, municipal uses that with the laydown yard, the dump, and the old chemical building. We did a lot of work within the TOD to get it ready for development. There were a lot of physical improvements made to the site, everything from purchasing or declaring tax title properties as part of this land assembly process. We also demolished everything that was already on the site. We cleaned it up. That just finished last year. The full environmental remediation of the site is ready to go for even residential development. So it's been fully remediated. We actually created the road, Riverfront Drive, which you see at the top of this image. That didn't exist until a few years ago. So a ton of work. Judy Robbins Park, named after the mayor behind it all, stretches along the river. It acts as compensatory flood storage as well as an amenity for the future residents of this area to use. Next slide. We've also done a lot of planning. The planning started 20 years ago. We've done everything from market studies to transportation studies to land use plans to economic analyses, and in the last couple of years we've done several from a TOD parking garage feasibility study and economic impact analysis. We're currently working on a revised vision and plan because obviously market conditions have changed dramatically since 2006, the last time we did that. And it's just been a long process of just continually trying to take the best advantages possible of this opportunity that we have. Next slide. Like I said, we do have the pending plans. Probably the most significant of those is the vision and plan, and that really goes off of everything else that you see there. There's also the things that you can't read in the blue are the wayfinding study and a parking management plan that affect the entirety of the downtown, but include that TOD land. We also have several other tools that we threw in. I like to layer incentive districts within our downtown because that's an area that has high concentrations of poverty. It's an area that has a ton of assets, both cultural and transportation and municipal, obviously, that can really be built upon. So it's our number one priority right now for redevelopment activities. So we have our housing development zone, which you see in red on this map. The TOD areas within that, the bounds of that. We also did district improvement financing, which yes, those two tools together means that you get a little bit less from the DIF proceeds, but they can work simultaneously and in harmony as long as the projects are well planned. We have the zoning overlay district, and that allows for greater density by right than what you typically get in the central district of Attleboro, and has a number of other specifications that really try to encourage this idea of alternate transportation uses. Next. Our first project has already been completed within the TOD. As of last autumn, One Wall Street has opened its doors to 136 new households in our downtown. This is a market rate mixed use building. It has a tiny component of retail, only about 3,000 square feet. But it is 1.5 acres. They invested over $34 million with no subsidy from the city in order to construct this building right in the heart of downtown Attleboro. So that's kind of the first wave of what you can expect from the rest of this project. We're looking at increased densities from what we'd originally anticipated in 2006 because there's obviously a housing shortage, as well as the fact that there's just a tremendous opportunity right now to take advantage of the market conditions and really optimize that investment per acre within the TOD. Next slide. There are a couple of obstacles that remain, some critical real estate transactions that we need to finalize with the MBTA. We now have bi-weekly calls with the MBTA's legal team and real estate team. They own certain fragments that would make this project far more developable. They also have some restrictions that can play into how this development process rolls out. Most significant is that if we build too close to the station or on MBTA land, it can kick into effect requirements for them to completely upgrade the station, make it fully accessible, elevators, raised platforms, everything else. Obviously, that's really expensive. That's not something that the MBTA just can wave a wand and say, yes, we'll do that for you. So we've got to get creative on how we can find solutions to that. Next slide. Keep going. These are some of the preliminary drawings that we've come up with through some of the studies that we're currently working through. So all of this material is in draft form as of now. This just shows the location and the configuration of the proposed parking structure within the optimal position. We looked at actually 4 options for the location of the garage. This one is over the MBTA surface lot. So obviously it would involve the most headaches. It would involve the most challenges for both ourselves and the MBTA. However, it opens up 2 additional development paths that wouldn't exist if we had to locate that structure on ARA land, which is basically the land directly to the left of that garage footprint. Next slide. These are some of the architect's renderings. They tried to echo some of the traditional mill buildings around. A lot of what's going to go in here is going to be new builds, so they wanted to create an aesthetic that married the old with the new. So they use the brick for the facade. They have larger openings for the windows that kind of resemble the mill buildings that are fairly close to where this station is located. Next slide. We've also, this is from our vision and plan. It's hot off the presses and totally preliminary. So this could change significantly, but we've done some massing for the development scenarios. Option number 1 keeps the garage basically the way that we had it in the garage study. It allows for 50,000 square feet of retail, or 30,000 square feet of retail. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the next slide. As well as 6 buildings that will in total support 585 units. So this is probably a less dense scenario. If you go to the next option, this wraps the proposed garage with residential units and a small component of retail. So you see that the number of spaces has decreased by about 400 or 300 rather. And you see that the retail has increased to 50,000 square feet. Now, can the area support it in terms of the underlying market dynamics? That's something that my consultant team is going through now. So, that could dramatically change at this point in time. However, what they're trying to do is optimize the sight lines as people are approaching the station, particularly from the Providence location, or as they're pulling out from towards Providence. The sight lines will cut through these buildings in a manner that you can see the 10-mile river. You can see the municipal park that is adjacent to that river. It provides a really harmonious series of greenscape throughout the project, while still providing an incredible amount of density with 765 units. And there's still more MBTA land that could be part of this. We're still early stage in those discussions, so that could even increase the density and the opportunity here. Next slide. That's all from me for now. The next steps for us, while we finish these studies, we're having, as I said, those biweekly calls with the MBTA, running everything past them, because that's what you've got to do when you've got one of these projects that's so close to a train station. What I will say is they're so willing to help. They've provided us a great amount of assistance, but the MBTA has a number of regulations that they have to follow that can be tedious and onerous and take forever when you're expecting things to go relatively quickly. So I applaud my peers over there and all of their assistance to us. I'm incredibly grateful to them, but my advice to anybody who is embarking on a project like this is really to make sure that you have them involved every step of the way, just so that you understand the limitations. The other piece is, after our plans are finished, we're simultaneously doing some surveying and title work, and we're developing the RFP at the tail end of this. So we're going to put this out under a master developer scenario. So we'll do an RFP for somebody with the level of sophistication and the level of experience and capacity that it takes to get through some of those challenges with the MBTA and to really do a lot of the oversight and coordination for the whole build out. However, we don't want to neglect smaller development teams who may have more niche focuses. A lot of times the developers that have come through Attleboro that have been on the smaller side have been women-owned development firms. They've been owned by people of color and immigrants, and these are people who we don't want to cut out of this project. So through the master developer structure, we can kind of build in the affordability component. We can build in the mixed use and the pure residential. We can, you know, make sure that there are components to the project that aren't entirely in the domain of just the one behemoth developer. We can make sure that there are other people who get a bite at the apple. So that's our strategy anyway, and anything TOD changes from time to time, but I think we have a pretty clear direction. We could potentially get a master developer in place by the end of this calendar year. Things are moving that quickly.
Thank you, Catherine. That's great. It's really exciting to see what's going on in Attleboro, and we can't wait to hear more of what comes next. I'm going to move on to our next presenter for tonight, and that's Jen Carloni from the City of New Bedford.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Carloni, Director of the Department of City Planning in New Bedford. And tonight I'm going to talk about New Bedford's JFK Memorial Highway, or Boulevard as it is now. So next slide. And this is one of the corridors as Lizette was presenting in the earlier to focus the conversation. So orient you to New Bedford, we're looking on the south coast of Massachusetts. We are a vibrant city of over 100,000. We are the most famous whaling era seaport, the top fishing port in America, with cultural attractions including festivals, arts programming, the Zeitarian Performing Arts Center, New Bedford Whaling Museum, and National Park. We have 26 acres of beaches, 12 miles of trails and bikeways, and over 30 parks. Next. The Port of New Bedford. The port has historically served as our lifeblood of our coastal community. As I said before, we are the #1 fishing seaport in America by value, and it is soon to be the launching pad of the American offshore wind. So next slide. So in the 1970s, to support our working waterfront and our port facilities and to expedite freight service across to these businesses, the so JFK Memorial Boulevard was put in through the city. So it became a limited access highway as shown here. And that was again to expedite freight access to the waterfront businesses and fish houses. And so again, as a limited access freeway, that means it cut off a lot of our neighborhoods from the waterfront as it's not pedestrian accessible. It wasn't a lot of, our next slide. Let's see that. There wasn't a lot of connections through to the corridor. Again, one more slide. And so again, no more pedestrian. The pedestrian access is very limited with multiple pedestrian bridges, such as this one that's shown. That was the only way you would get over this corridor. So again, next slide. And as I was saying, there was very limited through streets. So really, it was a car-centric corridor for our city. Okay, next slide. And so what did we do in the early 2000s was a revitalization effort that we're still working on. So as Catherine said, these are 20-year projects. There's 2 phases that have been completed, and the 3rd phase is in design process right now. So again, this is in the 2000s, they started a revitalization effort to connect our community back to the waterfront and turning the highway back into a boulevard. And so today we have a boulevard with public shade trees, greenscaping, landscaping, decorative overhead LED lighting, and it even includes, next slide. We have a shared use path on one side and which actually I don't think is shown in this picture, but we have a shared use path on one side, and we also have a complementary sidewalk on the other side. So this connects us back from our downtown all the way to our south end and connecting to our blue lane, which is our multimodal off-road pathway for bicycling around our peninsula, connecting to our beaches. So really, this has created quite a multimodal connection through our city from a north-south perspective. But also, as you can see here, we have new intersections that now you can enter into the highway at and make through connections. Up in the top part of this picture, you can see there's a new intersection there. So as part of this project, there were multiple new intersections integrated to make that connection through instead of having this wall that cut through our city. Okay, next slide. So again, as I was indicating, this included ADA compliant pedestrian crossings with push buttons, countdown signals, And it reconnects our neighborhoods to the downtown and the waterfront areas. And then next slide shows you an aerial. So this is our downtown, the State Pier in the center of the picture, and then our downtown is on the left side. So JFK Route 18 is, as you can see, that was right there, and you can see that pedestrian bridge picture up in the northern section there. That's that pedestrian bridge there. And then above that, there's another intersection that doesn't currently exist. And then I'll go to the next slide. You can see that in the top portion, we have a new intersection at Elm Street right there. So there was no need again for these high elevated pedestrian access ways. And we now can get across at grade to these areas. There's also multimodal connections that were added in here. So next slide. This is that new intersection. And then one more. You can see along here, we have a multimodal connection. This, on the left-hand side, this connects up and over to the New Bedford Fairhaven Bridge. You can get over to Fairhaven. This is important because it created safe multimodal access for our workers, our visitors, and residents to get through and around our corridor. And the next slide. And then what this project does is that it actually activated both sides of the corridor. So it's in this picture, you can see this is our port. We have this public park, and then we have our Wharfinger building with a clam shack on one side, and then a restaurant on the other side, kind of activating and giving people access to our port facilities. Next. So again, this is the before photo of Route 18 in our downtown, and this is the after. So today we have a community-centered corridor where the community can truly experience our beautiful port community with activated storefronts. Next slide. And so this is a before and after. You can see we have activated storefronts. You can see they have their mannequins out on display. We've got mural, we've got art. Really a place that people enjoy versus just a cars to go through and go by. And then next slide. And it's really contributed to a growing restaurant and cultural scene in the downtown. We've got lots of outdoor seating. Next slide. On the sidewalks and patios, decks, we've even have rooftop seating. Next slide. Events like the Star Chasers on one of their missions. They're a bike group in the city, and they're riding downtown to hit places. And again, they can connect from the downtown, riding along the corridor, all the way to the south end on the Blue Lane, which is our multimodal pathway through the city. And then next. Again, there's over 20 restaurants and eating and drinking establishments in our downtown. And while most cities saw restaurants closing during the COVID period, we actually had 7 new restaurants open in the city. So really we've got this hospitality amenities coming along because the infrastructure is there. They were able to expand out into the sidewalks, into the streets, and really well-activated spaces for all seasons. Next slide. You can see our Christmas trees. And then next slide. And really, again, as we showed, the ability to cross over has added to both sides of the waterfront, really allowing our hospitality industry to grow and continue to grow and allow people to experience the port, really understand what does a working waterfront really mean in our city. Okay, next slide. And this is spurred development, such as this project right here is a historic preservation of the formerly abandoned block. It was by WHALE, which is the Waterfront Historic Area League. It's now live with a co-working space, an art gallery, a juice bar, and residential apartments are located above. Next. And then upcoming, we have, this is going to be starting construction. This is 18 and Union. So this is at the bottom of Union, our main corridor. This is another historic preservation of a mostly abandoned block being done by LaFrance Hospitality along with WHALE again and Lanigan and Company. It will soon be under construction for a restaurant, residential units, and it's really going to be quite nice. Next slide. And then this is up a little bit further on Union Street, actually adjacent to that co-working space that I just showed. This is going to be under construction. This is 117 Union Street. It's a new construction and historic preservation. This is actually there's one building they're preserving, and then there's new construction adjacent to it. It'll be 51 residential units and 2 commercial units. And so next. And so just the point here is that well-designed multimodal corridors are important for our communities, and they truly support the change and the narrative for economic development in our communities. So come on down to New Bedford and see for yourself.
Thank you, Jen. That's great. I love seeing the before and after. I think that's my favorite part of this whole process. It's long and patience is required, but it is gratifying. Up next, we have Bob Espindola from Fairhaven. So take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the two prior presentations, I can tell you that. So what I have here is a presentation about our bike path in town in Fairhaven. And we are very fortunate. We're a town population of about 15,500 people right across the harbor from New Bedford. And we are fortunate to have had a bike path in town since 1999. And we are, we had, sometime after that, we had another extension that was put in place. And people have been enjoying that for a number of years too. So next slide. So this is the agenda of what I was thinking running through with you tonight, just to talk to you a little bit more about the path, and which provides recreational opportunities. It is used year round. It's used for commuting. We have Safe Routes to School program in town that kids commute to school on the bus with. I mean, to school on their bikes with. And there are some real estate testimonials, commercial testimonials, tourism testimonials, and then talk to you a little bit about connectivity to other towns and what we're looking forward to. Next slide, please. So this is what the bike path looks like. It runs through town, kind of parallel to Route 6. It runs from on the west side of town near the waterfront all the way to the town line in Mattapoisett. And then the extension goes down towards Little Bay and then crosses back over onto Sconneck Neck Road. It's 3.5 miles long in the main original path, and then 1.7 miles is what the extension is. It does offer some spectacular views over the water in several locations. Next slide, please. This is these are examples of the views that you can see from our bike path. So on the left, looking over towards Little Bay in the marsh area, and off the bike path extension, there's a path in the middle that goes down to the jetty. And on the right, that is the view looking north from the jetty. Next slide, please. So the path also provides recreational opportunities, and it's in close proximity to two conservation land projects. So it's the Shaw Farm Trail, which you see on the right-hand side of the map there in the middle of the map, is a path that runs down into the Nascatucket Bay Reserve, and it goes all the way down. You can walk the path all the way down through into Mattapoisett and down to the water. And the Cavallo Farm Trail, that's just off the bike path, you can reach by traveling a bit down Shaw Road. It's very accessible. That also is a nice nature trail. It doesn't go down to the water, but it's beautiful in there. And in the photo in the inset that you see there, you'll see, if you look closely, there's a bike rack with a bike there. And what we often see is people will ride their bike down the bike path, and they'll park their bikes on the bike rack and go on to the Shaw Farm Trail and then hike down to the water. You see families doing that. It's really very nice to see. Next slide. And so again, this is just the map on the left. It shows how expansive the Nascatucket Bay State Reservation project is. And goes, if you look at the top left corner, you can see the dashed line that represents the green line that represents the bike path in there, and then going all the way down to the water. So it's quite a network of trails from there. And on the right-hand side, you see a photo from the wooded area and the Cavallo Farm Trail, both very nice. Next slide, please. So this slide is just showing that the path is really beautiful all year round, and people use it all year round, whether it's, through the summer, obviously it's used the most, but many people walk and ride in the path in the spring and the fall. And there are quite a few diehards that'll be out on the path in the winter months. Some people use it for snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, and people walk their dogs all year long on the path. So it's and then there's some really the lower right hand photo is a bench that you'll see throughout the path. There are many benches so people can stop and take a view over the scenic areas. So next slide, please. So the bike path is used for commuting. Jim Anderson, pictured here, is a member of our Fairhaven Bikeway Committee. And he says that one of the main reasons he chose to move to Fairhaven and purchase the home he's in is that he loves to ride his bike, and he does ride his bike for errands to the grocery store, the pharmacy, and as he says, to stop at his favorite chocolate shop. He also rode to the senior center during COVID to get shots and testing, and he says he rides to the rec center to participate in a chair yoga class. The Council on Aging and Recreation buildings are both immediately adjacent to the bike path, so it's really quite convenient for people to get to them. Next slide, please. The bike path made possible a bike bus program where children from the center of town, where one of the elementary schools closed down, the Rogers School, and a lot of the children from the center were, relocated over to schooling at the Wood School, which is on Sconneck Road. And there was a bike bus that was formed where the children and their parents would get together, a couple times a week in the nice weather months, and they would gather at the old Rogers School and on off of in the center of town, right near the bike path, and they would ride together to school, and then in the afternoon they'd rejoin and ride their way back home. So it was really a nice program, and because the town participated in that program, it enabled the town to be eligible for a grant for infrastructure improvement, and that grant was received in order of $1.85 million. That's programmed for construction in 2024 at the intersection that's right behind these children in the photo. That's the Sconneck crossing of the bike path, and there will be significant improvements made during the construction of that project to make it safer for the children who currently, when they get off their bikes they'll ride their bikes to this intersection, get off their bicycles, and walk them to the rest of the way to the Wood School, which is, about 1/8 of a mile down, not very far, but it's the project would be aimed at things like making that safer for the children to ride right to school. And as you can see, we get testimonials from people who participated in the bike bus to really enjoy it. Chip Hawthorne and his daughter on the lower right-hand side. Next slide, please. So also realtors are, they tell us that the bike path is always something they like to promote in their listings. And this realtor, Sherry Lopes from South Coast Elite, she, says that she will call out the bike bus program that we just talked about as something that's an asset. And she says it's a huge benefit to the town, people walking, family with carriages, bikers, grocery bags. And she sees people sitting outside Willow Park, which is just towards the west end of the bike path. Margarets is a restaurant on the west end of the bike path. You'll see, people, collecting there to ride and going down to the Fort Phoenix area in the center. The bike path, she says, easy connector for grocery stores and restaurants, and great way to get exercise and errands done at the same time. And from her own perspective, I think this is really interesting that she, before the bike path was built, she and her husband used to drive all the way down the Cape to Cape Cod Canal to do some skating on the canal. And now they able to just, skate and bike right here in Fairhaven. So next slide, please. It's another testimonial from Mr. Kyle Bueno at the Howe Allen Realty Group. And again, they're telling their potential buyers about the bike path and proximity, and you can see they even list, in the examples shown below, they list the bike path in their listings as a key feature. And Kyle also uses the bike path, so kind of you can see a pattern here. Next slide, please. We have a local maritime college in town that's expanding yearly, and they own a number of buildings, including the one shown in this photo on Washington Street. They own several other buildings in the center of town, and Mr. Eric DeWicki, president of the Institute, it does say that his students use the path for recreational purposes and to run errands to the commercial district along Route 6. He calls it a great asset to the community. Next slide, please. So this is, again, an overview of the path and an example of some of the shops and stores that and restaurants that people will frequent off the bike path. And so over to the West End, the Euro and Margarets, Elizabeth's, and Brady's Ice Cream, Dorothy Cox's, Flower Girls. Dorothy Cox's is a chocolate shop. Flower Girls is a coffee and pastry shop. Stop and Shop, Jersey Mike's and Brick Oven Pizza over in the plaza, the Stop and Shop Plaza, and Max Soda Bar, which is just down Sconneck Neck, but in close proximity to the bike path extension. Next slide, please. So here's a testimonial from Dorothy Coxs. This is a young family that was visiting the store for ice cream, which they serve there, and so there's three little children there enjoying that. And their mom says that one of their children, Isaac, is able to ride with friends from where they live now in East Fairhaven to meet friends halfway between where they live and their prior home, which was in the center of town. So it's the connectivity for even children and their friends. It's really nice to see. Next slide, please. As a business testimonial, so these three buildings on the left, the larger building is Elizabeth's restaurant. In the middle is Brady's Ice Cream, and on the right is Margaret's. Elizabeth's and Margaret's are very well-known, very well-established businesses in town. They're right at the west terminus of the bike path, and a prospective owner for the business who's looking to purchase these properties has mentioned that he's considering purchasing these businesses in part because of their proximity to the bike path. That sale is not finalized, so I haven't disclosed his name. Next slide, please. This woman, Gail Isaacson, is an owner of a business in the center of Fairhaven, Euro at Phoenix store. We're on the corner of Center and Middle Street in Fairhaven. And Main Street in Fairhaven. She is, someone who's an avid bicyclist herself, but she's, indicates, and she also owns several properties near the town, residential properties. She does say she witnesses people coming off the bike path to the local restaurants and the shop downtown at the Euro ship store on Main Street, and that her tenants love to use the bike path for walking their dogs, and she herself enjoys it. Next slide, please. Jevin Malcolm is at Max Soda Bar, which is the one on the map I showed you that was a little bit up Sconneck Neck, but in close proximity to the Orchard Street crossing where the bike path comes out from the bike path extension. And he again says he sees occasionally people coming in on their bikes to the restaurant for lunch, breakfast, ice cream. And personally, he rides his bike from where he lives off of Hathaway Road, which is near Orchard Street. He'll ride all the way down to Brand Island Road to visit his father. And he says he sees a group of people that park and walk together at Orchard Street. So there's a social aspect. And we do have many places where the bike path intersects crossroads, and where you see people will park their cars and gather there to walk or ride together. Next slide, please. This is a message from someone, Mr. Brian Griswold, who is actually from Marion, and he says they like riding their bicycles from Mattapoisett to Fairhaven, and they get snacks and coffee at Flower Girls, and he's really hopeful that the path will eventually pass through the town of Marion. Next slide, please. It's another testimonial from Jersey Mike's, whose general manager indicated that they see people coming off the bike path and, to grab a sub and then, hit the bike path or vice versa. And, there was a testimonial I didn't get a graphic up here for, but the store manager at Michael Coleman at Stop and Shop did indicate the same. And that's one of the shops that, quite honestly, has the most frequent visitors on bicycles. So he acknowledged that, and he said he likes to see that himself. Next slide, please. And so tourism, we do see people from time to time pass through town on a bicycle with a destination further east, heading down towards Cape Cod. And here's an example here with Galen Mook, who's someone from an organization called Mass Bike, and Christine Keeney, who's from the East Coast Greenway, who were touring through southeastern Mass a couple of years ago. And you can see on the center photo on the bottom, that is a picture of the path that's on the hurricane barrier in New Bedford. Just like to point out that, for people who like to travel, a good distance on a bike, obviously, 25 or 40 miles might not be for everyone, but there are, many people who can ride that kind of distance in the course of a day. And we are actually in Fairhaven, not all that far from the Bourne Bridge and the Cape Cod Canal. And there are, between Fairhaven and the Cape, there are some exciting bridge projects going on. The Wee Weantic Bridge project in Wareham is an exciting project that's going to take place and include bicycle accommodations. And also the Bourne and Sagamore bridges, which are on the slate now with federal funding that's coming up in the not too distant future, and that'll make it much more easily, much easier to ride over the canal. Next slide, please. So some things we have to look forward to. This map on the lower left is courtesy of the Friends of the Mattapoisett Bike Rail Trail. And if you look at the red dashed line towards the bottom of the map there, that shows a project that's currently underway to connect the existing bike path where it ends. The green that you see is the end of the existing bike path that runs through Fairhaven and into Mattapoisett. And then the red is going to carry on into the center of Mattapoisett. And then there are projects that will take and pick up from there and travel further through Marion and Wareham that are on the horizon. The photo on the right is an aerial view of the partially constructed path that red line represents. So you see right where the cursor is, you can see the project is going to be built right over the top of some beach areas, passing over a waterway and marshy areas. It is going to be spectacular when it's finished. And that is a project that's due to be completed. It's had some stalls with COVID and then some other issues, but it is due to be completed in the next 12 to 18 months. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and it's just to show you that there are some exciting possible additions that'll make us much more connected to Cape Cod if they go through. And there's a heavy focus on Route 6, development of projects along Route 6 and the Mass DOT funding. The TIP has a number of projects between 23 and 25 that are, currently being planned. And then there are some projects on the supplemental list, which means they're being studied right now. And so it is conceivable that within the not too distant future, we could have much greater connectivity from our town in Fairhaven all the way down to the Cape. And that's extremely exciting. So that's all I have. And, thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, so we do have a few minutes for question and answer if anyone has anything they'd like to bring up. Again, if you have any questions that you would like a more detailed answer to, please feel free to use the chat feature and we'll get back to you in that way. Are there any questions for any of our presenters tonight? Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to remind you that the RTP is a long-term process, and the input that we get not only from our communities but from the public is really valuable in shaping our recommendations and our path for the future. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is up there. I will share the slides and post them up to our website so that you can read them clearly as well. I just want to say thank you to Catherine, Bob, and Jen for these great presentations and your great insights as to how we can link economic development and transportation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.